Today, want to talk a little bit about owner buying versus using, or leasing rather. What's more beneficial for them? So a lot of times when you're dealing with a client, you're working with someone that may be looking at a space. Their business could be, they typically, if they've been in business, are looking to expand, looking for something that owner user building. If they're looking to lease, you're kind of stuck into the actual space requirements that they need. If they have the opportunity to purchase, it may actually be better financially for them to purchase the property. But at the same time, it opens the door for you to be able to find other properties, because you can also get perhaps larger space. And then if they purchase a property, they can lease out the difference. So it gives you a little bit more leeway to see what's out there, the type of inventory, and potential for making the deal happen. Now the question is, how is it beneficial? Now, what are the negatives, what are the positives of owning the real estate versus leasing it? Okay, the first negative is that it costs more money, typically speaking, initially. And when I say initially, after a certain period of time, it actually can be financially more beneficial for the property or the business to actually own the property and lease it up. So that's something to take into consideration. It does cost more. Now with SBA financing, you can actually lower that cost, typically down, perhaps down to 10% or so of the down payment. So there are different ways that you can get a lower down payment in there, but of course your payments themselves are going to be higher with less down. So people are concerned. Businesses are going to be concerned about, well, are my payments going to be more than what the rent would be? In which case, maybe it's not good for the bottom line. Now, there's different ways for the accounting system to do this. Now, remember, ownership of real estate, you're allowed to depreciate it as well. So that ownership can also depreciate it and potentially impact their bottom line that way as well. So that even though it may cost more out of pocket, in the long run, it may actually be less. So we talked about this, about how, someone wanted to do that. Now we want to see a little bit more about, well, is it really beneficial or not? And when does the benefits of owning really take over? And, ultimately it really depends on each particular property. But what we've done is create a spreadsheet. So I'll take a quick look over here so we can look at some of the items here. So as you can see, this is just a 123 Main Street. It's a made-up property based upon actual current rents and what is going on right now in the marketplace as far as interest rates and size of building square footage, what they're looking for. So this is actually based off of a real property in an area. A couple of things that you're going to need to know, obviously, is the square footage that they're going to have to occupy. Remember that part of SBA is that you have to occupy at least 50% of the building to qualify for SBA. Typically speaking, you have to be in business for at least 2 years, profitable, and the business has to be able to qualify for the payments on the property based upon this, if they were kind of rent or other P&Ls. So keep all of that in mind. When we look at this, as you can see on the spreadsheet right here, we have a renter occupied square footage of 5,001 square feet with a proposed purchase of a 10,000 square foot building. Current interest rate is 6.5%, which is a blended rate with SBA and current interest rates where they are. And then you have the property value. Let's say it's $3,850,000. Down payment in this case is $385,000, and your monthly mortgage amount is $23,395. 90% loan to value. Yearly mortgage payments are $280,000. You have no annual increases. Another benefit of owning versus leasing is that leases always typically will go up in the long term. So there's always annual increases in a lease. In a purchase, that mortgage typically stays the same unless you refinance out. So current rental rate on this particular property is $3.75 a square foot per month. So we translated this into a monthly exchange so that you can actually see it compares to how it compares to on a monthly basis to the mortgage as well. From there, you have annual increases right now, 3% on your lease rate. So we then calculate a lease cash flow going out 10 years. So you have the annual rent starting here is $225,000. Obviously, that sounds a lot higher than $280,000 for your mortgage payment, which it is. But we're going to get into that a little bit more. So as you can see, coming down, going through the chart itself, you have 3% increases, but also in a lease, there is what's called expense recapture. Okay, what that means is that when you start a lease, even a full service gross lease, the tenant themselves are responsible for the difference in expenses over a base year. Okay, so based upon that, we've calculated expense reimbursements, or what we call CAM fees, in this, and going up and then increasing annually, using about a 4% increase in expense rate right now, which has historically been about been correct. I think in the coming years right now, if we're in an inflationary period, it's going to be a little bit higher, but we're going to use an average because we're looking at this as a 10-year period. So with that, over a 10-year hold time, you have costs of just rent alone about $2,579,000. Another $21,000 in expense reimbursements for about $2,600,000 in total cost to actually lease. That's the cost to lease that property. Okay, from there, we're now going to look at a purchase cash flow. So as we scroll over into this spreadsheet, you'll see that on the proposed purchase, you have the property tax, of course, because now they're going to be responsible for the property taxes. All the maintenance or CAM costs. Total cost with principal, interest, taxes, insurance is roughly $378,000 a year. Okay, really sounds a whole heck of a lot more when you start looking at the total cost of the lease ownership, which is around $225,000 for the first year. So as we go into this, you have, as we talked about, we have estimated annual depreciation. Okay, so we can depreciate the building out, and then you also have a benefit for that. Annual depreciation is about $70,000 for this particular purchase. In addition to that, this property that they're looking to purchase is a 10,000 square foot building. So they're going to be renting out 4,999 square feet, just under one half. So you have that rental expectations and what you're getting on the rental itself, based upon that $375 a square foot per month that we talked about earlier. So that's an additional $108,000. From there, you have a gain on equity. So one thing that we have to remember is that whenever we pay down the loan or make a payment on the loan, part of that payment is paying down the loan. So we call that gain on equity. So all things remaining the same, if you were to sell the building at the same price, even after a 10-year period, you're going to have quite a bit of gain on equity, close to about $800,000. That is almost kind of like a savings account. So you're building equity up in that property. In addition, the next benefit, which we'll talk about at the very end here, is that you have appreciation in that property. As someone leasing a property, you don't get any appreciation for that property. What you do get is, the landlord is taking on the majority of the risk, but you're not gaining or earning any of that appreciation. You're going in, you're paying the rents are increasing, but you're not getting the benefits of that in the sense of appreciation in the property. The landlord themselves do. If you own the property, you would get that benefit. So from there, we're then going to look at the adjusted cash flow after the rental, and it's $270,000. Okay, so this takes into account your total cost, which was $378,000, minus the percentage of the estimated depreciation that you're going to get on a tax basis, minus the additional income from the rental. And also minus the gain on equity. So that gives you an adjusted cash flow with the rental. Okay. Lastly, your adjusted adjusted net cost when you put the gain on equity in, because that's really not a cash flow, the gain on equity, because you're really building up kind of like I said, a savings account, so to speak, you're paying it off, but it's still a benefit to you. So when you actually take your net cost and take a look at that, it's only $212,000. So it's actually less than if you were to do a straight lease. So overall, I mean, to me, looking at this makes financial sense that I should buy the property even on a year one basis if I had the down payment. When we start looking at this in a long term, so under a long-term analysis, we have a summary right down here where you have out-of-pocket costs of ownership, $4,266,367. Now, we're going to add in the additional income from the rental, which is about $1,136,000, gives you your true out-of-pocket costs about $3,129,000. And then you add in the gain on equity, which is about $1,164,000. Add in the appreciation minus the expense for the cost of sale. So for appreciation, we used a conservative 2% annual appreciation rate based upon the purchase price. So we take that and we adjust it. We also look at cost of sale, because if you're looking at this as a 10-year hold and you want to figure out your true value, not only do you have to figure out the benefits and what the cash flow is, but if you were to sell it, what would that cost be? So we've taken that into calculation as well. So with that gain on equity and the appreciation, the appreciation comes out about $475,000. Now, assuming you're in a 35% tax bracket, no state taxes, just what's called higher end federal side, you're at 35%, you get that benefit in depreciation. Over the 10-year term, that benefit is actually about $250,000, just shy of that, about $240,000. So your adjusted cost of ownership is about $1,248,000 and 2.6 for cost of leasing over the time of the lease term. And so your actual benefits of owning a property are about $1,352,000. Okay, so if they actually purchased this property because they had additional equity that they could put down into the property, purchase it using that as the down payment, and then going through all this and structuring it this way, you're going to actually have a benefit over $1 million, about $1,400,000 over 10 years. Okay, so a couple other benefits of owning that property, things that we have to take into consideration. I mentioned that the property itself, as you pay down the equity and you gain the appreciation, a couple things that happen. Number one is that you're kind of building that bank account. So you're coming back to it, you're building that equity in the property, your equity is growing, your loan to value is less. So you could potentially, after 5 years or so, refinance out. Okay, if you know that there's no rental increases, you would have been paying more in 5 years anyways on the lease. So you could potentially refinance out, get a regular loan versus a SBA loan, so that your interest rates are lower and that you actually returns are even higher. The other benefit is, let's say the company wants to expand a little bit in 4 years. Well, they don't have to move now because they're going to control that lease, and they can control the other half of the building and the leasing and the structures of the leases so that it matches their business plan and goals of what they're trying to accomplish long term. So it could also adjust costs when it comes to moving. It could adjust costs when it comes to expansions and playing, where you might have to worry about, if I move my office, am I going to lose employees? What's the disruption that I have to take into account? In this case, they don't have to do that. They can actually plan around that accordingly. Lastly, one of the main benefits of owning a property is that in certain times, you might be able to take advantage of that ownership to expand your business. What I mean by that is, if you need capital, we talked about how the gain on equity and the appreciation is kind of like building your bank account. Well, at a certain point, if you need to, you can sell the property and do a sale lease back so you don't move. set your lease rate, set the lease terms. When you sell the property, then you capitalize, take the equity out, and you can use that to expand your business, or you can use it to, potentially, well, possibly for retirement if you're looking at getting out of the business, expansion during tough times, or if for some reason, you need to beef up your cash reserves, you can do that as well to make it look a little bit better during rough times if you're having a cash flow issues. So, having this as a asset on your books can potentially be better. Just ownership itself, you're ahead of the curve by about $1,350,000. However, if you also take a look at what you can gain for the intangible benefits as far as the ability to expand, the ability to tap into that, the equity that you're building, it can really be important to a business. Now, one of the questions that people ask, and we're going to go back to the spreadsheet now. What if they bought, in this situation, we had a property that was exactly, or they were about half of what they needed, so they were leasing the other half out. Well, what if you don't have that rental income? Is it still beneficial to own that property? So we can easily take a look at this and adjust this by saying the total square footage of the building is 5,001, which then takes out all of the rental information. So again, your cost on the lease is the same. You're about $2,600,000 for total estimated lease cost. Now, when you start looking at your purchase cash flow again, we're going to look at the year 1 through 10, property taxes, CAM costs, total cost, principal and interest, and then adjusted net costs with that. And then when we look at that, as you'll see, there's no additional income from rental at this point. We start looking at depreciation again, still the same, and then we look at the bottom line. So the bottom line is, yes, it does impact it, but it's still more equitable and beneficial to own the property by about $505,000. So it's substantially less, but you don't have the headache of leasing and managing the tenants that are there. So overall, it can be beneficial to own versus leasing. You want to talk to your clients, explore those abilities, what they can do, what they're willing to do, what the benefits are, what the negatives are. And this way they can make the best decision for themselves, see if they can grow their business in a strategic manner using real estate principles. So when you talk to your leasing clients, also, perhaps if you're having a hard time finding a property, maybe we might want to look at something to buy as well. If they have the resources available to do so, it can usually does prove beneficial in the long run for a business to own their property. So any questions?
Yeah, brilliant option, by the way. Discussing with potential clients these benefits of ownership, even as a talking point, even as an icebreaker.
Mm-hmm.
What are typical down payments as far building is $2 million?
Well, typically speaking, if they're getting SBA financing, and this is kind of how we structured this, the numbers could actually potentially be better on a cash flow basis if they put more money down, obviously. But most small businesses don't have as much capital to put into a building like that, nor do they want to tie up as much. So small business administration is typically the best course of action up to a $4 million purchase, and that's 10% down. They might be able to go higher under certain circumstances if there's other stuff that's also included, like equipment and things, but that's something to talk to your SBA lender about. But typically, SBA, you can go as low as 10% down, assuming the business, one, has been in business for over 2 years. They have the profits and losses that they can show that can support the mortgage payments. And to be frank with you, a lender may also want to have extra collateralization for them to cross-collateralize against like a personal residence or another investment property. So those are the things to take into consideration as well on that loan. Anything else?
It's just more beneficial to own than.
Yeah. That's it then. It's more what?
beneficial to own,
Can be.
but it costs like more upfront.
It's cost, because it depends on what it can be more beneficial to own versus lease. However, that really plays a part into what that business plan is. You know, they may not want to utilize the capital that they have to buy a property, because that equity is now tied up. They may need it for other reasons, for expansion or whatever, but if they do have the capital that's available, it generally does work out better to own versus lease.
And you're just simply not gonna get those answers from the tenant unless you ask.
Absolutely. No,
You
this
gotta
is,
ask the question.
you're absolutely right. This is what I always say about bringing value to the table.
Yeah.
You know, you wanna look at things not just in a straight line approach, but more of an all-encompassing approach. What's best for the client? You know, have they even thought about this? Have they considered this? Because if they haven't, you know, that's something that they might want to take a look at. You know, one of the other things as well that you have to remember is that, you know, SBA will also finance your tenant improvements. So if you need to build out and do that, that can be part of the acquisition cost. So it really can minimize a lot of the costs associated with going into a new space. But you still have to have that 10% down payment.
I mean, you know, that's a lot of money. Down payment.
Absolutely.
Down payment.
But you know, it's amazing when you start talking to clients about this. They kind of open up a little bit more, because they understand that you're actually looking at their business and the success of their business and the long-term future plan, which also then causes them to want to work with you in the future as well. Even if you end up doing a lease, you're going to be there for the lease renewal. They're going to remember how you thought, that you tried to bring value to them and explain the situation and work on it in this way, in a manner that most other agents are not necessarily going to look at.
No other agent will do this.
Well, some of them.
To go through this kind of work and that kind of analysis, I mean, you know, with tenant representation, and that's brilliant, the purchase option. To just present it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It can be.